My mom used to drive me and my sisters to religion classes every Saturday morning. We would wave goodbye as the car drove away, waiting until she was out of sight, and then walk directly over to the McDonald's next door. We would hang out there for the 2 hours we were supposed to be in classes, and then when she came to pick us up, place ourselves amongst a crowd of kids waiting for their parents. She never understood why we weren't hungry after a long day of learning. Having really religious immigrant parents didn't make me pious. It made me a really good liar. I lived the double life. I was the Muslim daughter that they needed to believe I was, and the American teenager that I desperately wanted to be. I was the Hannah Montana of Islam, the Hanan Muhammad of sorts. David and Anthony became Angela and Danielle in my phone's contacts. There was a drawer at my best friend Katie's house full of the shorts and tank tops that my mom would have never let me out of the house in. If I wanted to go sleep at a friend's, I told my parents I was going on a heavily chaperoned and mandatory school trip. To this day, my parents think there's a rule at Princeton that boys aren't allowed in girls' dorm rooms past midnight. You see, growing up, Islam became something that I had learned to be ashamed of. My parents didn't finish high school in Egypt and couldn't teach us Arabic or much about the faith, so all I knew about Islam was that while there were about 20 beautiful churches strewn across our 3-mile city, the Muslims had to congregate in the basement of St. Henry's Catholic School. When people asked, I told them my parents are Muslim or I was raised Muslim, as if it wasn't intrinsically a part of me. I thought that would make it easier to exist in a place that didn't seem like it was made for us. But when the Bayonne Muslim community proposed a plan to move out of the basement of St. Henry's Catholic School and build their own community center, it didn't make it any easier to watch my neighbors protest against it. It didn't make me any less sad or scared or angry to watch the people that I grew up with march up and down the streets of my home protesting that they didn't want terrorists in town. It didn't make me any less disappointed or unsurprised when the Bayonne City Council found that there was a zoning problem and voted against issuing a permit to build. I thought that distancing myself from Islam by going by Amy instead of Eman would make me more acceptable. But going by Amy didn't change the way the secretary at my high school internship squinted at my last name, Abdalla. Going by Amy didn't make it hurt any less when I overheard her asking others in the office post-inauguration why we should let in those people chopping each other's heads off in their own country. Going by Amy didn't stop her from asking me questions about Islam, and then when she didn't like the answer, going by Amy didn't change the way she went to my boss and told her that I was spreading my religious agenda in the office. Going by Amy didn't stop her from asking me if my parents came here legally or if we were fleeing violence. And going by Amy didn't stop her from going through my history on my computer, finding a Twitter article about ISIS that I had been reading, and then firing me for researching Islamic hate. It's funny she said it like that, Islamic hate. In a way, she was right. I was fired because of Islamic hate. The same Islamic hate that voted against the Muslim Community Center. The hate that people have for Islam, for something they don't understand. The hate they want us to have for ourselves. The hate that I was letting win every single time I introduced myself as Amy instead of Eman. Every single time I talked about my parents' religion as if it wasn't my own. When I got to college, I took my first Arabic class. But this time, I didn't hide in McDonald's. I sat and I tried to become literate in my first language. I called my parents after every class. Sort of like Sesame Street, they listened excitedly as I told them about the letter of the day. For the first time ever, I had something to talk to them about that wasn't a lie. And I learned that I loved Arabic. My handwriting in Arabic was better than my handwriting in English, and I was obnoxious about it. I wrote my name in both languages on all of my assignments, even my P-sets. My friend told me about an Arabic summer program in Morocco and Oman, and I was sold, especially after Princeton agreed to pay for it. Admittedly, deciding that my first time abroad would be in the Middle East alone for 2 months was a bold move, but it was the best decision I've ever made. I have never felt kindness, compassion, or a sense of community like I did over those couple of months. My Moroccan host mom treated me like her daughter from day one. She doted on me, poured love into every one of our meals, and made me truly feel like I was a part of her family. To her, it was simple. She was Muslim, and that's what Muslims do. We barely spoke the same language, but we sat up together and cried as she told me the story of her first daughter's adoption. I didn't need to know every word she was saying to feel how earnest she was when she told me that everything she had ever been through, everything that made her the person that she was, the person that I adored, was because of Islam. The same Islam that prompted people in Oman every single morning to stop me as I walked on my way to school and asked me if I needed a ride or a meal or some juice. Once I stopped what I thought was a taxi, got in the back seat, asked to be taken to the market, and then only afterwards found out that it wasn't a taxi, just a nice man who didn't want to embarrass me. I was still very embarrassed. When I visited the Great Mosque in Abu Dhabi, I saw something more beautiful than just the spectacular architecture. I saw hundreds of tourists clamoring to put on traditional garb and take part in the celebration of a Muslim place of worship. I picked up a Quran, and for the first time I could read from it. Actually read it. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I tried to pray. I must have been way off because a woman came over and tried to help me. But there was no judgment in her actions or her voice. And I truly felt like I was a part of something that I was so proud of. The same sense of pride that I felt when I came home and found out that the Bayonne City Council settled on a case with the Department of Justice, forcing them to allow the Muslim Community Center to be built. The same sense of pride that I feel today that pushes me to say Bismillah before every meal, Subhanallah when I see something beautiful, or Alhamdulillah when something good happens. It's not much, but it's enough. Enough to stand up here and say, my name is Eman Abdalla, my parents are Muslim, and so am I.